Greetings, everyone. I'm Dr. Dave Webb, and welcome to the Homerun Leadership Show. This webcast, this webinar, there's probably a whole lot more puns you can make with the last name of Webb, but whatever this is called, we are pleased to be here today with Pastor Renee Patterson. She's one of the best pastors that I know. She runs the Shepherd of the Hills Church in Shoreview. She's the senior pastor for Shepherd of the Hills. Uh, at that same church, I'm congregational president currently. So we're going to have a conversation today that I think will be especially helpful for church pastors, congregational presidents, boards of directors, and really leadership in general. So we're going to use IROD. We're going to still always come back to the information, reactions, options, decision list. But Pastor Renee, do you want to say hello and just tell us a little bit about your background and experience?
Hi, everybody. Thank you, by the way, Dave. It's an honor to be here today to talk about this process that has been formative and transformative to my leadership. I'm a second career pastor. My husband and I owned and operated a small business for 38 years. And kind of wish I would have had IROD when I did that for 38 years. But I think in one way, shape, or form, good leadership runs these bases, and this process simply works. And I've seen it over and over again as we have worked it as a governing board and as I work it in my own life. Just super appreciative of how this keeps me connected to where I want the leadership direction to go. So grateful to be here.
That's wonderful. Thanks. We're really glad you're here. This should be a very fun show. Pastor Renee has an incredibly quick wit, and you'll pick up on that throughout our show today. Today, what I'd like to just take a minute and get us grounded in is the whole reason we do the show is to help reduce your leadership stress and increase your leadership success. The how we do that is really coaching good process. So the process in team decision making is the same 4 steps over and over again. You follow 4 steps in decision making, problem solving, conflict resolution, facilitation, all of these great leadership systems use 4 simple steps. So today, Pastor Renee, I'm going to take you back to, you stopped me on the way out of church and you proposed this position called governing board president and say, hey, Dave, I think I'd like you to consider being our board chair. We have an opening now for our board chair. I know my wife chimed in at the same time saying, oh, yeah, he'd be great at that. He does that all the time. Exactly right. So Julie and Pastor Renee, I think we're in cahoots before I walked out of church that day.
Yeah.
But long story short, I said yes. We get to the first meeting, and the board has to now deal with this board chair that's teaching something called IROD and decision making and problem solving. Can you try to get back to that first board meeting and share a couple of stories?
Yeah. Brilliant meeting. Thank you. So it's this evening. We have our governing board meeting. It's Dave's first time with us. So he comes in as our board chair. So grateful he said yes to that. But there have been some people that have been on the board for, golly, one member was in her 7th or 8th year. And so she'd been through, I think this was the 3rd or 4th governing chair by the time Dave came in. And Dave introduces this process that he'd like us to figure out, what our leadership style is. And I'm sitting next to this seasoned congregational member and a longtime member on the board. And she rolls her eyes so large, I think her eyelashes are going to get stuck back in, just so large. And she's like, oh my gosh, another leadership gimmick. And I just, I said, listen, let's just listen. And he asked us these questions to help us understand where we most heavily reside in our decision-making process. Do we reside in the information? Do we need more information before we can make a decision, or more reactions, feelings? Do we want to just get to third base of what the best option is? Or are you a decision person, which is fourth base? I am a raging fourth baser. Like he has two questions, like, nope, right there. I'm a fourth baser. But he also helped us understand the importance of all four bases together. So I'm a raging fourth baser, and I just want to get to the decision and get on to the next task. But when I do that, I have cut out all the information that we might need to make the best decision. I've cut out all the reactions for people and the feelings that might come about from this decision. I don't even care what the best option is. I just want to decide on that one and move on. But when I do that, I potentially have created fires for myself, and the information, the reaction, and the options sections are people who reside in those. So Dave asked us to kind of move around the room, get up out of our chairs and move around the room depending upon where we thought we were. He asked questions and we kind of stood in our space. And then we ran the bases with a particular question. I didn't remember what the question was, but we needed to make a decision on something, and he ran the bases with us.
And let me add to that just for 1 second. So let's tell the story about running the bases in just 1 minute here. So for people that are just listening in, excuse me, if you're just listening in, you can really go to my website, homerunleadership.com. You can take the free assessment right there to find your leadership type. It's a 3-minute assessment. It's just click yes and no. It's 20 questions, and you'll find out if you are a first, second, third, or fourth baser. So the reason I had people get out of their chairs is the science of the leadership types lands right on top of all the other science of 4. This core 4 repeats itself in all the leadership science. So the core 4 repeats itself in decision, problem solving, but also for leadership types. So Pastor Renee said, hey, she's a fourth baser, and not just that I'm a raging fourth baser. I am too. I'm a fourth baser. So we like to just decide, and we sometimes skip the information, reactions, and options on our way to quickly decide. So the reason I had people get up out of their seats and say, what base type are you? Is once you get up out of your seats and you have people at first, second, third, and fourth base, that's what I call your Homerun Framework. So that framework is a baseball diamond. The reason I have everything that ties back to 4 steps is we needed a system to be able to coach and teach others. So I had to coach my own school board, coach my leadership team as a superintendent, coach my church board, coach my family, coach everyone that I cared that was around me that I wanted to have increased success. That this work is the core of all leadership science that you need to know to increase your wins and success. So we set the stage. Our church governing board was in one of those 4 corners and set. And then this big decision came in front of the board the very first night and tagged back in Pastor Renee to keep talking.
Well, and then he had a butcher paper up. So we not only did they have butcher paper up, so we talked about the options, but also it was great for other people in our governing board to see where they were on the baseball diamond, who was with them in the information section, the reaction section, the option section, decision section, and that helped them brainstorm other questions. Like they felt camaraderie within the team and within their sub team within the larger team. So that was actually a fantastic exercise for us to do. And then we said, so then we decided this is the question. It's written up on the top there. So what information do we need about this question? And the information people just dug in and lit up. Like they were in their element, brainstorming all the ideas, all the information they had to have. And then when they all realized that they had all the information they needed, and Dave asked the brilliant question, is there anything else? Is there any more information you think you need? They then looked at each other and said, no, I think we're good. And you just saw the reaction of those people just go down. Nope, we're good. Then we moved on to the reactions.
Can I add one more thing there while we're still wrapping up first base? So what Pastor Renee highlighted there was how to complete first base.
Mm.
So you get to first base with the question, like, do we have all the information? Is there any other data, details, facts, information that we're missing here? You want to make sure you have it all. And even though you think you have it all, you ask the question that Pastor Renee just highlighted, which is anything else? Because information people, if they don't have all the information, they're going to say, well, yeah, we don't have last year's budget, or yeah, we don't have the background information that we need on this. And they'll tell you exactly what's needed if you continue to manage the process, not manage the decision.
And managing the
So,
process also, Dave, is creating space for them to make sure they have time to answer those questions.
right. So then go ahead and go on to second base then.
So once we had managed, or what Dave had managed, first base, and the first basers felt like they had the information they needed at that moment, then we moved on to second base. What are the reactions? What do you think the feelings are about this question or this decision we need to make? And those second basers, one of them, a brilliant woman, just came up with some great thinking or feeling ideas, feeling things that I'm already over here in fourth base waiting for everybody to stop talking so we can make a decision, right? But she just kept going, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. And she asked the questions, and we talked about the reactions and the feelings, and I saw this process just kind of almost effortlessly unfold, because then as soon as we realized, are there any other feelings or any other reactions about this decision we need to make? And again, we saw the anxiety, or whatever we want to call that, of that sub team go down as soon as they realized that we had talked about the feelings and the reactions for that.
And they were very valued, heard, respected, honored. And oftentimes people skip second base because they don't want to touch anything controversial. They don't want someone to say something critical to a process. So the whole process is counterintuitive. And if you can slow down and let people actually share all the information, all the reactions that they have, all the options, we then went to third base, sharing options. I'll let you jump in there shortly. You begin to build trust because people know that you are going to honor their leadership type, their leadership style, and really their leadership needs. So go ahead and take us to third base.
Yeah, as soon as we got done with second base and we realized, and those people, their anxiety went down and they realized that they were heard, even in the hard questions. Like, that's the space to ask the really hard questions, like Dave said, that no one wants to talk about. But if you don't visit them there, you will visit them somewhere else. So it's a valuable space to give room for that. And the third basers were just kind of hanging over on the side for us to get to the final, where are we at? And they, after they heard the information reaction, they're like, well, this is the best solution. Or sometimes we'd have 2 or 3 up there, and then we would just hammer away till we got to the best option.
Yeah, so that hammer away, in my book, the Homerun Leadership book that I published on Amazon just a couple of months ago. I'm not sure if I can show up here well or not. There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the challenge of a green screen behind you, right? So the Homerun Leadership book is on Amazon, became a #1 bestseller this year. What it does is it gives you all the inside baseball tips and tricks to really run the bases well. So at third base that Pastor Renee is talking about, when you get to third base, one of the gifts of Homerun Leadership is it gives you the exact 4 steps that you want to complete to get from third base to fourth. So if you have a list of brainstorms, that's the very first column at third base. Pros and cons are the next 2 columns of each of those brainstormed options. I always share the story about trying to decide what's for dinner with my family every night. And usually it's chicken, burgers, or tacos. And we lay out those 3 and we talk about pros and cons. And then we reprioritize the list. Like I said, Dad, we're really getting tired of burgers every night. So can we go with, chicken or tacos? And I'll say, okay, got all your pros and cons. Which one are you leaning now? Are you leaning more chicken or tacos? And they'll say, chicken tonight, and I get the will of the group. At the governing board, it's the will of the board, but the will of your family, the will of the board, the will of your administrative team, whatever that majority is that you've set and determined, you can move forward with that. And even if somebody gets outvoted on tacos, probably gonna have tacos in a couple of days anyway. So usually all works out and we keep moving forward. So take us to fourth base. We've got leaning from the group now on this decision. What do we do at fourth base?
So by the time we got done with third base or had processed with third base, okay, we have this question up. We have all the information. We know what we're feeling or we think the reaction is going to be. We have 3 different options. Those are the best options. And now we brainstorm those. We've landed on this one option. So then we create space. Do we feel comfortable with us making a decision on this one? And that's when I want to go, yep, let's go. But we have to allow a little more time. Are there any other questions? Do we feel comfortable with how we got to this process? And that creates space for everybody to revisit. Do I need any more information? Do I want to talk about any more reactions? Is there another option we can talk about? And when the will of the group feels like we got to this decision through this process and space was created for people's thoughts to be heard, then I have the will of 10 people on our governing board that feel comfortable with it and are on board with it. So then once we bring that decision up to the congregation, all of our people understand why we got there and how we got there.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. Then you have 10 ambassadors out there able to carry the message forward. So when we went into budget reductions with my leadership team as superintendent, really a 2-month process of budget reductions. And by the time we got to the end, every team member knew exactly why things were being voted off the island or being reduced and cut, and could carry those out and really share the why out with their school or with their department. And that was invaluable. So like Pastor Renee said, getting everybody there, giving space to say, okay, this looks like we have a decision. Can we confirm this? Is this the will of the board? Is this the will of our team? Is this the will of our family? If you can confirm it and give space there, you can get everybody on board. Even if they didn't vote for it, they can get there and support the message, even if they're outvoted. One other thing that Pastor Renee said that I want to highlight is if you can make space at every base for that, you will have fewer church meetings or board meetings or administrative team meetings where people feel the need to gather in the parking lot after the meeting to share what really should have happened at the meeting. So it doesn't matter which team I'm on. The number one thing that team members say is, Dave, since you've been running IROD with our team, our meetings are about half as long. Like, it seems like it's going to be longer because we have to touch every dang base. We have to run the bases. We have to ask like 8 questions for IROD and anything else after every one. That's what we call the Homerun Leadership Formula, those 8 questions. It seems longer. It's counterintuitive. Why would we want to do that? Because you can shorten your board meetings, shorten your administrative team meetings, shorten your family decision makings about where you want to go on vacation or what movie you want to see, and give you more enjoyable time with your family, with your team, with your board. So great comment, Pastor Renee.
Well, after we ran the bases and we got to the decision on the first, this is the first time Dave has taken us through this. I want to circle back to the original seasoned congregation member sitting next to me who whispered, "Oh, another leadership gimmick." And after we got done running the process, she leaned over, she says, "Well, I'll be danged if that didn't work." And she appreciated it because she felt like something that could have taken up 45 minutes to an hour of conversation just on the conversation. And it sounds like it's going to be a long time, but the whole process took us maybe 15 to 20 minutes. And that is even learning it. It really did streamline it, compartmentalize people so they felt like they were heard. I think the one of the key things that Dave has touched on is creating space for it to happen. You can't skip the bases. You can't skip the process and the time frame in that. But when we did that, the magic happened. Then we got to my raging fourth base, and we got to the faster and cleaner. And also the anxiety went down in the group on the decision. And when the anxiety for our leaders goes down, then the anxiety in my organization goes down, because they're saying the same thing, and it just doesn't spin or breed additional side conversations, like you said, in the parking lot.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with that skipping a base, skipping the science scenario for a minute. So Pastor Renee and I do a weekly check-in phone call. So if you talk about executive coaching, one of the things we do with Homerun Leadership is to support others through executive coaching. And just as church council president, we just do this weekly check-in at the end of every week. And Pastor Renee is usually deep into writing her sermon for Sunday, and she gets this phone call that interrupts her good writing from her council president, and
Always
then just
appreciated,
says,
but okay, yeah.
but we just unpack. Hey, can we just take a look back at how the week played out, and can we look ahead at the coming week? Is there anything there that you want to talk about and share and unpack? And oftentimes there's one or two things, and sometimes we just unpack it, run the bases on it, brainstorm together. Oftentimes she's already at fourth base. Like she said, she's a raging fourth baser, so she already pushes there naturally. But we also want to take time, because I'm a fourth baser too, to just slow down, make sure we've touched first, second, third, and fourth together. And that's how you get better and better home runs, when you can cross home plate together. So you use a phrase that is referring to people that get stuck at a base. And I'm looking at my note card here, because you use the phrase, they oftentimes get stuck in a roundabout. Can you explain that a little bit? I think it's brilliant.
Well, so when you're touching the bases, so for one particular thing, we had a meeting, and we moved too quickly off of first base. And this particular team member needed more information. And it was a hard decision that was being made, but I felt like we had spent enough time. So I quickly moved the process, because I want to get to fourth base. And this particular team member, who's very valued, stayed on the roundabout information. Like, we tried to get to second base and move to third base, and she just kept bringing us back of needing more information, because I hadn't created space for all the information that was needed to be had. And what happens what my experience is, when someone gets stuck on a roundabout, is you can't get to the other processes. You can't get to the gold of fourth base decision, and you can't move on to anything else, because that person is unknowingly sabotaging the rest of the processes, because they aren't being satisfied. Their information is enough, or their reaction, not enough space wasn't created for that to happen. And then it's messy and then also contentious. So
yeah, when their needs aren't met,
yes,
they can so what it manifests as is resistance on the team. So it'll appear to you as a leader that this person is just being a resistant team member. What they really are trying to do is just get all the information. So making space for all the information, all the reactions, all the options, all the decisions is really one of the most inclusive ways of leadership. So if you want really great, equitable, inclusive leadership that respects all voices, IROD is the science of four that keeps repeating itself in all the great leadership literature.
Well, people always talk about collaborative leadership. This is exactly, if you're not actually being a collaborative leader unless you're actually running this process.
Right. And so Stephen Covey always said, I didn't discover the 7 habits of highly effective people. I just brought all the research together to make it visible. And I didn't create and develop IROD. I did simplify all the different systems that follow 4 steps and use the IROD term in the book. All these other systems use like what, got, so what, now what. All these systems have different names for their 4 steps. I just pull them all together, all the restorative practices, all the team facilitation into a simplified 4-step process so I can keep teaching, coaching this for teams to be able to use it in a simplified way. So let me go to another question for you. Governance versus management. So you are lead manager, as lead pastor, senior pastor for our church. As governing board president, I lead the governing board, try to keep the board in governance. Can you just talk about the roles of management and governance in a church setting and why that's important?
Ooh, I think finding the difference between the two can be challenging, specifically if a church, this is my second call, and I think if a church doesn't have a clean line in that or understanding where those lines are at all, then you have people on your governing board or your church council making decisions as to what kind of paper goes in the paper copy or what kind of donuts happen on Sunday morning, things that really they shouldn't be spending their time talking about those things. A governing board or a church council should be staying in the value system, in the governance, in the direction, in the ministry carrying out of this organization, and then running the basis on those questions. Those other management things, and that's sometimes a trust issue. I'm really grateful I have a solid governing board that trusts our management team. And I'm grateful that we have somebody like Dave, that when somebody brings up the fact that we don't have enough maple glazed donuts on Sunday morning, Dave's like, let's leave that to the management team. Probably not something our governing board needs to be making a decision on.
As serious a problem as, a lack of maple glazed donuts are. Yeah, it's not a governance question.
Right.
So I always come back to, in governance, you always look at high level finance. So on our monthly meetings, we always do a financial review of how we're doing, big picture finance. We always make sure that we are supporting any policy updates and changes that need to be made.
May I point out, though, Dave, that even when we look at high level finance, you make us run the bases to make sure everyone feels comfortable with, is there any information that's missing from this financial? What are we thinking about? We might be short by a little bit this month. What are the options? You always make us run the bases, even when we look at our reviews.
Yeah. And so it doesn't matter what topic you're on. If you're really just running good governance and you touch all 4 bases, you're just way ahead and you have wind at your back.
Yep.
So making sure that the senior pastor is supported, selected and supported is still a role of that governing board as well. And just overall church, I like to call it public relations, community relations of the church. Those 3 or 4 things, if you can really stay there as a governing board, you're way ahead. If you can let your management team manage the day-to-day, manage the hiring processes and all the rest. A lot of times church governing boards like to drift into, get their fingers really deep into hiring, especially if it seems like a high profile position. But if you can let and support your management team to create the structures to really run that process, you'll strengthen management and strengthen the governance in your church at the same time. So thanks for that. That was awesome. I'm going to just talk about maybe one last piece, which is as we close today, do you have a favorite moment, like where you say, thank goodness we had IROD, it really worked? Just a reflection, you can go back over our 5 years together. Do you have a favorite home run?
Ooh, you asked me this before, and I have about 8 of them. I need to get it down. Yeah, I think so. We've talked about getting a team somewhere. So we at our church are updating our church constitution. If anybody out there's done this, God bless you in that, right? It's such a process, and it always opens up this can of worms of everything that's happened in the past. Like, why did that get into our church constitution? Why do we need to? So as we update it, and it's a lengthy process, sometimes you have to pull some things out of your constitution. Well, there was this one particular site, and then we did this. We had a group get together. We talked about our constitution. We decided that certain things aren't serving us any longer. We're gonna redline them and take them out of our constitution. So then we had congregational conversations around it.
Right.
Well, one particular member did not agree with this particular section being taken out. I had been told by somebody else that, oh, he is coming to the conversation. He's going to implode. His whole purpose is to implode this entire process because he believes so strongly about it. So I talked to Dave in advance, and he's like, remember to run the bases. Try to stay in that mindset. And sure enough, and it's right away in the beginning of the conversation because it's the beginning of the Constitution. And so we open up with prayer, and then we start talking about, does anybody have any questions? And this person says, yeah, like right away. So we say, well, congregation member, what is your thoughts? And he goes off on this particular reason as to why this should not be taken out. So, and I immediately run the basis with them. I ask him some questions. What information do you need about this? And we answer his questions. And it's only one person we're running the bases with, even though it's in this larger group. And then well, the reactions about that. Why do you feel like you need that should remain in there? Well, can we brainstorm ideas about why we should or not have that in there? And luckily we had some of the other team members that helped us craft our new constitution coming forward, and they chimed in as well. And so the brilliancy of it was, by the time we got to the decision part, we had asked questions all along the way, and he's the only one we're asking the questions are. We got to the point, we're deciding we're taking this out. Will of the group, or how are you feeling about that? And he said, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand why we're doing it, and I'm completely comfortable with it.
Wow. And
that whole thing took about 8 minutes, 10 minutes. Wow. For somebody that had come to the meeting with the sole purpose of imploding it. And we all, as pastors, as church leaders, have somebody in our congregation that's going to do that with a process or something we want to do. But as I ran the bases, I was almost in tears at the end of joy and relief, because I love this congregational member. He's awesome. He just didn't see eye to eye, but by the time I got done, he felt completely comfortable and said, I trust the rest of the process. You people know what you're doing. Godspeed ahead. And that was a huge win, because it could have easily gone in another direction.
You were inclusive. You heard the voice. You shared perspectives, allow for his perspective. You touched every base. You got wind at your back with other perspectives being shared by other team members for more information. And he left with saying, I fully understand it, so I'm not going to oppose it.
Yep.
And sometimes that is a home run, just somebody not coming into an annual meeting opposing your plan.
Yep.
Understanding it, not saying that they have to agree with everything or love everything, but sometimes just helping them to get to a place where they can support it is a huge home run. And that was a huge home run.
And it was interesting because after the meeting was over, after the gathering is over of our people, I think 3 other members came up and said, I have the exact same question, was going to go in the exact same direction. I feel completely comfortable with what you're deciding. I'm like, yes. It was an absolute win. You guys, the formula works. It really works.
Yeah, and there's no better base runner than you, Pastor Renee. I just really appreciate you taking the time today to help other leaders, church leaders, business leaders, school leaders. All of your stories will help build their base running skills. I always say, if you get to this level of leadership, you're already a home run leader. Our whole hope and wish of doing these programs is to just increase your batting average. We want to give you skills and tips and tricks to run the base path better and better and faster. And like the fourth basers that Pastor Renee and I are, we like to get there faster. We want to get to the decision. And if you never get to a decision, we get frustrated with our personality type. So it gives us the ability to respect the process, respect all the people, trust the process if you can know the four bases. So that's really the key takeaway today is know the bases. That's your framework. Know the questions, really the four I read questions and anything else, those eight are your formula. And put those together to get more home runs every single day. As a guest on the show today, Pastor Renee, we have the 21 video series course that we have online. We have that free for you today. If you want to stay on afterwards, I'll make sure you have the passcode for that.
Okay.
And just as a reminder, any final comments or thoughts you'd like to share?
Just that it's a discipline and you have to revisit it all the time and remind yourself. When we had a very long annual meeting that was on Zoom, Dave had me put a little Post-it note up on my wall here, to remind yourself of the process, because it's so easy to get knocked off of it. But when you stay in the process, people, it works.
Right. And even with those long congregational meetings, we just had this when we have 100 people on Zoom. It takes a while to get all of first, all of second, all of third to get to the home run. We got there, we got the home run. It just took a couple hours because we had to move 100 people around the bases. So don't worry about the time, worry about the process. Stay focused on the framework, stay focused on the formula. And if you want to go great places, I always say keep running the bases.
Amen.
Thanks for tuning in today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pastor Renee.
Yep. Honor. Appreciate being here.
Take care.